Hey there. Imagine being a young, passionate artist, pouring your heart and soul into your artwork, only to have your piece win an important art contest. Sounds like a dream come true, right? Now, imagine that one simple painting, the one you worked so hard on, ends up triggering something much darker, something unexpected. It's a story that begins with excitement, but as you'll see, it quickly turns into a chilling mystery that might just leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Stick with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just about art, it's about secrets, crime, and a discovery that no one saw coming. Trust me, you'll want to stay till the very end. This is not your typical art competition story. In fact, it's way more than that. And I promise, by the time you finish watching, you'll be just as captivated by this mystery as I am. Meet Emily. She's a high school student who's known for her artistic talent. She's got that rare gift, that ability to see the world in ways most of us can't. She's been sketching since she was a little kid, and her work is truly breathtaking. Her paintings capture emotions, landscapes, and even people in such a unique way that anyone who's seen her work has been left in awe. Emily's about to enter the biggest art competition of her life, the one that could finally get her the recognition she deserves. This is a big deal for her, and like any teenager, she's excited. This is her moment, the one she's been waiting for. But what happens next will send chills down your spine. See, Emily doesn't just paint something ordinary. Oh no, she creates a scene, a beautiful landscape, but it's more than just a sunset over the mountains. As the contest judge looks at her painting, he freezes. His face pales, his breath shortens, and then, after a long, uncomfortable pause, he asks her the question that will change everything. Where did you see this scene? Emily is taken aback. What do you mean, where did I see this? She wonders. She painted it from her imagination. Or did she? Now, this is where things get strange. The judge isn't just admiring her work, he's deeply disturbed. His eyes dart across the canvas, and he starts to connect the dots in his mind. But before he can explain himself, he does something odd. He asks Emily if she knows anything about a cold case. A cold case. A case that's been unsolved for years, with no leads, no suspects. Something that's left everyone scratching their heads. And it gets worse. He believes the scene Emily painted is eerily similar to a place connected to that cold case. A place that no one, not even the police, could find. At this point, you're probably wondering, what's going on? How could a painting trigger something so disturbing? And that's exactly what you'll uncover in today's video. As the story unfolds, Emily finds herself dragged into a mystery that's much deeper, darker, and more twisted than she ever imagined. She didn't know it when she started, but this art contest wasn't just about winning for her, it was about unlocking a secret buried in time. A secret tied to a tragic event, a missing person, and a crime that had everyone stumped for years. But there's a catch. Emily doesn't know this cold case like the back of her hand. She didn't have any prior knowledge of the crime scene. The last thing she expects is to be tangled in a puzzle with her artwork at the center. But with the judge's unsettling reaction, Emily realizes something is very, very wrong. As the judge presses her for details, she starts to doubt her own memory. How could she have painted something she's never seen before? Could she have unknowingly witnessed something through a dream, a vision, or maybe even a forgotten memory? Or could this be something more? Could it be a coincidence? And if it is a coincidence, then why does the judge seem so sure that her painting is directly linked to the case? There's so much more to this story, and I promise, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Emily's life is about to be turned upside down, and you'll be on the edge of your seat as we take you through every twist and turn. The deeper she digs into this mystery, the more she realizes that nothing is as it seems, and the truth is a lot darker than anyone could have predicted. But here's the real question that will keep you hooked. What will happen when Emily starts to uncover the shocking truth behind her own artwork? Will she be able to unravel the mystery before it's too late? Or will the past catch up to her in ways she never saw coming? Keep watching, because you're about to find out. This is not just a story about a high school artist. This is a story about hidden secrets, buried truths, and the terrifying realization that sometimes, art can reveal more than we're ready to face. I know what you're thinking. You want to know how this all ties together. You want the answers. And guess what? You're in the right place. By the end of this video, you'll have all the answers you're dying to know. But we're not there yet. We've only scratched the surface of this chilling tale. And trust me, it's only going to get crazier from here. You're about to hear things that will make you question everything. So stay with me, because what happens next will keep you guessing until the very last second. Are you ready? Then let's dive in. You're going to want to see how this mystery unfolds. Emily had always been an introverted kid, the type of student who spent most of her time in the art room, sketching and painting in solitude. Her parents, loving but busy with their own lives, never fully understood her obsession with art. They were proud of her, of course, but they didn't get why she spent so much time lost in a world of color and brushstrokes, far from the hustle and bustle of the social scene at school. She had friends, sure, but they were more acquaintances than close confidants. Emily's best company had always been her easel, her paints, and the endless swirl of inspiration that filled her mind when she looked at the world around her. That's why the art competition had meant so much to her. It wasn't just a chance to prove herself as an artist, it was a chance to be seen, to be recognized for her talent. The competition was held at the local community center, an annual event that drew in artists from all over the county. The first place winner would not only get a cash prize, but also the opportunity to showcase their work in an exclusive gallery downtown. For someone like Emily, who often felt invisible, it felt like the golden ticket, the thing that could change everything. But now, with the competition over and her painting hanging in the judge's office, everything seemed to be spiraling into something she couldn't control. The judge, Detective Michael Harris, was a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving difficult cases. He was a familiar face in the local community, having worked on several high-profile cases in the past. What Emily didn't know, what no one knew, was that he had been quietly investigating a cold case that had been haunting the town for years, the disappearance of a young woman named Sarah Lawson. Sarah had vanished without a trace one summer night, leaving behind only a broken phone, a locked car, and a faint trail of footsteps leading into the woods. It was a case that had grown cold, and no one had been able to piece together the puzzle, despite the best efforts of the police. Over the years, people had stopped talking about it, and the mystery had faded into the background of the town's history. But for Detective Harris, the case was never truly closed. The eerie connection between Emily's painting and the case started to consume him. The landscape Emily had painted was strikingly similar to a spot deep in the woods near where Sarah had been last seen. It wasn't just a passing resemblance, it was almost identical. The winding path, the twisted trees, the distant hilltops that could only be seen from a certain angle, all of it was there in the painting, as though Emily had somehow captured a moment in time. But how? Harris couldn't shake the feeling that Emily knew something, or perhaps had seen something, that the rest of the town had missed. Could her artwork be a clue? Or was it just an unsettling coincidence? As Emily tried to brush off the judge's strange reaction, she began to feel the weight of something she couldn't explain. The more she thought about the painting, the more she realized she didn't have a clear memory of how she created it. It had started as a simple idea, a vision of a quiet landscape at sunset, but as she painted, she felt as if something was guiding her hand, something outside of her own conscious mind. She hadn't thought much of it at first. Artists often speak of being in a flow state, where they feel disconnected from the work, as if it's coming through them rather than from them. But this felt different. It felt almost unnatural. And now, with Detective Harris's words echoing in her mind, the painting didn't seem like just art anymore, it seemed like something more, something that might have ties to the very real tragedy of Sarah Lawson's disappearance. The deeper Emily dug into the mystery, the more questions arose. She started hearing rumors around school. There was talk of people who had seen Sarah the night she disappeared. Some said she had been arguing with a man, a mysterious figure no one could identify. Others whispered about a strange group of hikers who had been in the area around the time Sarah went missing, though their identities remained a secret. Emily also heard about a man named Eric Walker, a local who had a reputation for being a bit off. He lived on the outskirts of town, in an old house that had long been abandoned by everyone but him. He was known to have a keen interest in local history and had been researching the cold case for years. Some even said he had once been a suspect in the disappearance, though no one could ever prove it. His strange behavior and intense focus on the case made him a figure of suspicion in the community, but nobody could pinpoint exactly why. Then, there was Sarah's family. Her parents, once hopeful, had become bitter and reclusive, haunted by their daughter's unresolved disappearance. They rarely left their home and had become almost paranoid, avoiding any mention of the case. Emily's curiosity about the whole situation led her to visit Sarah's family home under the guise of wanting to learn more about Sarah's life for a school project. What she found there only deepened the mystery. Sarah's mother, a woman whose eyes were perpetually red from crying, spoke about her daughter in hushed tones, as though even saying her name aloud might stir up something dark. Her father, a once proud man, seemed to have lost all sense of hope and spent most of his time locked away in his study. But it was the things Emily saw in Sarah's room that would stay with her. Old photos, faded journals, and one particularly strange piece of artwork, a painting of the exact same landscape Emily had painted. It was a chilling moment that stopped Emily in her tracks. How could this be? How could Sarah's painting look so similar to hers? Had Sarah known something that no one else did? And if so, was Emily's own artwork tied to it? Could her creation somehow be unlocking the past? The further Emily went, the more unsettled she became. Her every step seemed to lead her closer to the edge of something dangerous, something she wasn't prepared for. Detective Harris, meanwhile, had been keeping a close eye on her. His interest in her work wasn't just about the painting. He was beginning to suspect that Emily might hold the key to solving the cold case. But what if she didn't know it? What if she had seen something, felt something, and simply couldn't remember? Or was it possible that someone was manipulating her, using her talent to uncover long-buried secrets? As the days went by, Emily started to feel as if she were being watched. Everywhere she went, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following her, lurking in the shadows. It wasn't just paranoia. There were too many things that didn't add up, too many connections that were impossible to ignore. Was it the police, keeping tabs on her? Or was it someone closer, someone with a personal stake in keeping the past hidden? The closer Emily got to the truth, the more dangerous the situation became. And as she realized, some mysteries, no matter how much you want to solve them, are better left alone. But was it too late to turn back? Every new lead seemed to pull her deeper into the web of secrets surrounding Sarah's disappearance. And the more she discovered, the more questions she had. Why did her painting resonate so deeply with Detective Harris? Was it because he saw something in it that he had missed all those years ago? Or was it because, like her, he was finally ready to face a truth that had been buried for far too long? One thing was certain, Emily was in the thick of it now, and there was no going back. What would happen when the pieces of this twisted puzzle finally clicked into place? Could Emily uncover the truth before it was too late? Keep watching, because the mystery is far from over. The days following Emily's discovery of the eerie connection between her painting and Sarah's mysterious disappearance were a blur. It wasn't just the unsettling feeling that something was watching her, it was the constant barrage of questions, unanswered thoughts, and the undeniable sense that she was inching closer to something dangerous. As the investigation continued, the tension only grew. Emily found herself questioning her own memories, wondering if she'd somehow been manipulated into this search for the truth. But there was one thing she couldn't shake: the painting. The more she thought about it, the more it felt like the key to everything. If she could figure out why it resembled the location of Sarah's disappearance, maybe she could finally piece together what happened that fateful night. But Emily quickly realized that the closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous things became. It all started when she decided to revisit Sarah's house, hoping to find any additional clues that might link the two paintings. She needed to understand why her art had somehow mirrored the very place where Sarah had vanished. But when she arrived, she found something odd: Sarah's parents weren't home. This wasn't unusual, they rarely answered the door or spoke to anyone anymore. But something felt off this time. As she walked around the back of the house, something caught her eye. Sarah's bedroom window had been left slightly open, a small gap that seemed too deliberate. Her curiosity piqued, Emily quietly approached the window and peered inside. For a moment, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The room had been completely ransacked. Books were thrown about, papers scattered everywhere, and the walls, which once displayed Sarah's artwork, were now bare. But what truly caught Emily's attention was the missing painting, the one she had seen before, the one she thought was Sarah's. It was gone. Confused and shaken, Emily left the house in a hurry. She had no idea what this new development meant, but she felt certain that it wasn't a coincidence. The painting had vanished, and that felt like a red flag. She couldn't understand why someone would take it. Who would have any interest in hiding it? Could it be someone close to Sarah's family? Or was it possible that the person responsible for Sarah's disappearance was still out there, trying to cover up something they didn't want anyone to find? Emily couldn't be sure, but the pressure to uncover the truth was mounting. She had to keep digging. Later that evening, Emily was at home, pacing around her room, trying to piece everything together. Her phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number. "Stop digging into the past. You're better off letting this go. It's dangerous." The message was brief, but it sent a chill down her spine. Who would send her a warning like this? And why? She couldn't tell if it was a threat or just an anonymous tip-off, but it was enough to make her hesitate. Still, Emily's curiosity burned brighter than her fear. She couldn't walk away from this now, not when she was so close. But she did feel the weight of the message pressing on her, like a dark cloud hanging over her. The following days only made things more complicated. Emily began to feel increasingly isolated, unsure of who she could trust. Her friends had started to pull away, not understanding why she was so obsessed with the cold case. Even her art teacher, who had been her biggest supporter, seemed distant and evasive when she mentioned the painting's connection to Sarah. It was as though everyone around her was trying to tell her to leave it alone. Everyone, that is, except for one person, Eric Walker, the reclusive man who had been rumored to have a strange obsession with the case. Emily didn't know what to make of him. He was odd, yes, but he also seemed to know things about the case that no one else did. When they first spoke, he had mentioned Sarah's disappearance in passing, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he knew more than he let on. One night, after a particularly tense encounter with the detective, Emily decided to seek out Eric. She needed answers, and Eric seemed to hold the key to unlocking some of the mystery surrounding Sarah's disappearance. When she knocked on his door, he let her in without hesitation, almost as if he had been expecting her. His house was cluttered with old maps, dusty books, and stacks of files, most of which were related to the case. As they sat in his dimly lit living room, Emily felt both nervous and oddly comforted by his presence. He spoke in riddles, alluding to events that seemed just out of reach, yet always just on the tip of his tongue. "I've been studying this case for years," Eric told her, his voice low and deliberate. "People think it's all just a cold case, but there's something more to it. Something that's been hidden." He paused, staring at her intensely. "What you're doing, Emily, it's dangerous. There are people who don't want this truth to come out. They'll do anything to keep it buried." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. The way he spoke made it sound like he wasn't just talking about a simple disappearance, there was something darker at play, something much bigger. But before she could ask more questions, Eric abruptly changed the subject. "You're not the first to try and dig up the past," he said, his voice tight with warning. "You won't be the last either. But remember, some things are better left untouched. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again." Emily left his house that night with more questions than answers. Eric had always been a suspicious figure, and now she was starting to doubt his true intentions. Was he trying to warn her? Or was he part of the mystery himself? The more she thought about it, the more confused she became. What if Eric knew more than he was letting on? What if he was hiding something, maybe even connected to Sarah's disappearance? She didn't know if she could trust him, but one thing was certain: he was now part of the puzzle, and she needed to figure out whether he was an ally or a player in a much larger game. The following day, Emily decided to visit Detective Harris again, hoping for some clarity. But when she arrived at the station, she was told he was unavailable. When she asked about his whereabouts, the receptionist simply shrugged, offering no further explanation. That was odd. Harris had always been so reliable, so accessible. She decided to leave a message, but as she turned to walk away, something caught her eye: an envelope resting on the counter, marked with her name. It was sealed, and no one seemed to be around. With her heart pounding, she picked it up. Inside, there was a single piece of paper with only one sentence written on it: "You're asking the wrong questions." Emily felt her stomach drop. She didn't know who had left the note or why, but it was clear now that someone didn't want her to uncover the truth. And as she stood there, staring at the cryptic message, she realized something else. The more she learned, the more the pieces of this mystery began to shift. Every time she thought she was getting closer to the truth, something or someone pushed her back. There was no doubt in her mind that Sarah's disappearance was more than just a cold case. It was a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit, and Emily was the one holding the missing link. Now, she had to decide what to do next. But little did Emily know, the most dangerous part of this mystery was still ahead. As she prepared to dive even deeper, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that someone was always one step ahead of her. And just when she thought she was getting closer to the answers, she found herself staring at a new twist that might just change everything. What was she really uncovering, and who was pulling the strings? The next day, Emily felt the weight of everything pressing down on her more than ever. The envelope, the cryptic message, and the strange warnings were all signs that she was delving into something far darker than she had ever imagined. She'd spent the entire night replaying every conversation, every encounter, wondering if there was something she'd missed or someone she could trust. But as the sun set and she tried to clear her mind, another chilling turn of events made it clear that things were only going to get worse. It started with her best friend, Laura. Laura had always been Emily's confidant, the person she turned to when things felt overwhelming. They had been inseparable since childhood, sharing secrets, dreams, and endless hours of sketching in Emily's art room. But now, as Emily tried to explain the twists and turns of the case to Laura, she noticed something strange. Laura's eyes weren't filled with the usual curiosity or concern, they were clouded with something darker. Emily could feel it, a subtle shift in the air, as though something had changed between them overnight. It wasn't until Laura spoke that the unease finally settled in her stomach. "Maybe it's time you stopped, Em," Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. This isn't just some mystery to solve. People are getting hurt. I've heard things. Things you don't want to know." Emily froze. What did she mean? Things she didn't want to know? Laura had always been supportive, encouraging Emily to follow her instincts, to dig deeper. But now, she was advising her to back off. The words felt like a punch in the gut, and for the first time in this entire ordeal, Emily questioned if she was truly doing the right thing. But she couldn't shake the nagging thought that Laura knew more than she was letting on. And before she could ask, before she could push for the truth, Laura's phone rang. She answered it quickly, her face turning pale as she heard whoever was on the other end. Emily watched her closely, the atmosphere thick with tension. After a brief conversation, Laura hung up, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," she said, but the way she said it made Emily's stomach churn. It wasn't the usual calm reassurance, it was a warning. They both knew that something dangerous was circling around them, but the question was, who was it? And why was Laura so suddenly distant, so eager to push Emily away from the investigation? As they sat down together in Emily's living room, Laura explained something she had never mentioned before. A year ago, before Sarah's disappearance became the haunting mystery that gripped the town, Laura's family had lived in a house not far from where the cold case had started. She had never told Emily about it, not because she was trying to hide it, but because the memories were too painful. It wasn't until that moment that Emily realized Laura had a hidden history with the case. Laura's family had been the last to see Sarah the night she disappeared. They hadn't been close friends, but they had been neighbors. And something in the way Laura spoke about it, the way she mentioned how the community had turned its back on the case, made Emily think that her friend might know far more than she'd ever let on. Was she simply trying to protect her from a dangerous truth, or was she hiding something else? The silence that filled the room felt suffocating, as though something was about to snap. Then, just as Emily was about to press Laura for more answers, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Detective Harris. "You're closer than you think. Meet me at the old mill. Bring no one." Emily's heart raced. What did he mean by that? Why the cryptic message, and why had he told her to come alone? She couldn't ignore it, this was the break she'd been waiting for. But she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to spiral completely out of control. Emily stood up, ready to leave, but as she turned toward the door, Laura stopped her. "Don't go there, Em. Please. This is bigger than you know. It's dangerous." There was something pleading in Laura's voice, something that made Emily hesitate. But before Emily could respond, Laura added, "There are people who want to stop you, and they're closer than you think." Conflicted, Emily made her way to the old mill anyway. It had been abandoned for years, but it was rumored to be one of the places Sarah had been seen just before she vanished. It was the perfect place for secrets to hide, a decaying structure in the middle of the woods, isolated from the world. As she approached, she saw the figure of Detective Harris standing near the mill's entrance, his face shadowed by the dimming light. His posture was rigid, and something about him seemed different, colder, more guarded than the man she had spoken to before. The unease in her chest grew stronger with every step. "I told you to come alone," Harris said in a low voice, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "But I'm glad you did. You're in deeper than I thought." Emily tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Was he implying that she was being watched? Or that someone else had been keeping tabs on her all this time? The tension was unbearable, and before she could ask any questions, Harris pulled out a manila folder and handed it to her. "I found this hidden in the sheriff's office," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "It's a file on Sarah, but it doesn't match anything in the public records. There's something in here that changes everything you thought you knew about her disappearance." He paused, locking eyes with her. "And someone tried to cover it up." Emily's heart pounded as she took the folder from him. She could feel the weight of the mystery pressing down on her. But as she opened it and skimmed through the papers, her blood ran cold. The documents inside contradicted everything she had believed about Sarah's case. They were photos, dates, and notes, but there was one piece of information that stood out: a name. A name that wasn't in any of the previous reports, a name that Emily recognized. It was Eric Walker, the very same person who had been helping her, advising her, throughout this investigation. The man who had been so cryptic, so oddly helpful, now had a direct connection to Sarah's disappearance. How could that be? Was he involved in some way? And if he was everything he had told Emily part of some twisted manipulation? The folder slipped from Emily's hands as her mind raced. This was the moment she had feared. The moment she realized that the people she had trusted the most, the people closest to her, might not be who they seemed. Laura, Eric, even Detective Harris, none of them were what they appeared to be. And as Emily stood there in the growing darkness of the old mill, the weight of the truth settled in her chest like a stone. There were no clear answers anymore, no way to tell who was on her side and who wasn't. The lines between friend and foe had blurred beyond recognition. And the more Emily uncovered, the more she began to question everything, everyone. Was she the one being played, or was she, too, part of a much larger, darker game? She didn't know. And as she turned to leave the mill, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was waiting for her. Waiting for her to make the wrong move. What she didn't realize was that the real danger had only just begun. As Emily stepped out of the mill, the weight of the folder pressing into her hands felt like a burden too heavy to carry. She was trembling, not from the cold night air, but from the realization that everything she thought she knew was crumbling around her. Eric Walker's name had been the last thing she'd expected to see, especially not tied to the mysterious case of Sarah's disappearance. She had trusted him. In fact, she had started to believe he was her ally, someone who understood what she was going through, someone who could help her piece everything together. But now, standing there alone in the fading light, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Eric was no longer the trustworthy figure he had seemed to be. He had to be involved in some way, maybe even the one pulling the strings, manipulating her every move. But why? What was he hiding? Her breath quickened, the thought of him lurking somewhere in the shadows gnawing at her mind. Emily had always prided herself on being sharp, on noticing the little things, but now it felt like she was losing her grip on what was real and what was fabricated. Her footsteps echoed through the empty streets as she made her way back to her car, the feeling of being watched growing stronger with each step. As she reached her car and fumbled for her keys, she heard a rustling sound behind her. Her heart skipped a beat, and she spun around, but there was nothing there, just the empty street, the dim glow of the streetlights casting long shadows. She shook her head, trying to brush off the anxiety gnawing at her. She was just being paranoid, right? But deep down, she knew something was wrong. Her gut told her that she wasn't imagining things, that the danger was closing in. When Emily got home, she locked every door and window, pulling the curtains tight. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, waiting for the right moment to make a move. She tried to focus on the case, on the clues she had gathered, but the urgency of the situation was too overwhelming. She needed to talk to someone who might understand, someone who could help her make sense of the chaos. But who? Laura was acting distant, too distant for comfort, and Eric, well, she wasn't sure she could trust him anymore. As she sat there, the silence in her apartment thick and suffocating, she heard the unmistakable sound of a knock at her door. Emily's blood ran cold. Who would be here this late? She wasn't expecting anyone. Hesitant, she stood up, the sense of dread swelling in her chest. She moved toward the door slowly, trying to quiet the rapid beat of her heart, praying that it was just a neighbor or someone who had the wrong address. When she opened the door, her breath caught in her throat. There was no one standing there, just a small, plain envelope resting on the doorstep. It looked innocent enough, but Emily could feel the weight of it, the sense of danger it carried. Her hands shook as she picked it up, almost afraid to open it. This wasn't the first time she had received something like this, but something about it felt different. The envelope was heavier, as if it contained more than just a note. Her mind raced with the possibilities. What could this be? A warning? A threat? Inside, she found a single piece of paper with a short, chilling message: "You've gone too far. Stop now or the next one will be yours." Emily's stomach churned. Who had written this? And what did they mean by the next one? A cold sweat broke out on her skin. This was no longer just about Sarah's disappearance. This was about her now. Someone was actively trying to silence her. Someone wanted her to back off, to drop the investigation before it went any further. The question that had been haunting her for days now loomed larger than ever. Who could she trust? She shoved the note back into the envelope, her fingers trembling as she slammed the door shut and locked it. Her thoughts were a whirlwind of fear, paranoia, and confusion. She was in over her head, and the truth was becoming increasingly elusive. She had no idea who was behind these threats, but they were clearly watching her, waiting for her to slip up. Every decision she made now felt like a dangerous game, and she was starting to realize how high the stakes truly were. Emily picked up her phone to call Laura. But just as she was about to press her friend's number, the screen of her phone went dark. The battery had died unusually quickly. She could have sworn she had charged it just hours ago. Panic set in. What if someone had tampered with her phone? What if they were monitoring her every move, cutting off her ability to reach out for help at the worst possible moment? Feeling the walls closing in, Emily grabbed her charger, but before she could plug it in, her phone buzzed. A text message. It was from an unknown number, and the message was short but sharp: "You're running out of time. Leave the case alone before it's too late." Her mind raced. She didn't know who this was, whether it was connected to the earlier warnings or if it was someone else entirely. But whoever they were playing a dangerous game with her, and it was becoming more clear by the second that they would stop at nothing to keep the truth buried. She knew now that they were watching her, tracking her every move. She was being pushed into a corner. Just then, the lights in her apartment flickered. It was only for a second, but it was enough to send a wave of terror through her. The familiar hum of her refrigerator, the whir of the AC, it all suddenly seemed too quiet, too still. She listened, straining to hear anything that could break the silence, but it was unnervingly quiet. Then came a sound, faint at first, but growing louder, a soft, almost imperceptible tapping on the window. Emily's blood ran cold. She stood frozen, the blood in her veins thick and heavy. It was coming from the back window, the one that faced the alley behind her building. She slowly turned, her mind screaming for her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The tapping continued, rhythmic and steady, like someone was trying to get her attention, or worse, trying to get inside. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, Emily rushed toward the window, pulling the curtain back with a swift motion. The alley outside was dark, nothing but shadows and the faint outline of the trash bins. But that wasn't what made her freeze in terror. No, It was the figure standing just beyond the reach of the streetlight, barely visible in the darkness. She couldn't make out their features, but she could feel their eyes on her. They were watching her. And that was when she realized she wasn't alone in this. Not anymore. She ran to her front door, locking it again and retreating to the farthest corner of her apartment, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. She had no idea who that person was, or how long they had been standing there, but one thing was clear: she had made a dangerous enemy. And now, the walls were closing in faster than ever. The urgency of the situation was suffocating, and Emily couldn't help but wonder if she had already crossed a line from which there was no return. With the weight of the case, the threats, and the growing sense that her life was on the line, Emily knew that she was running out of time. But who could she trust? And would she even make it through this? Every moment felt like it could be her last, and with each passing second, the mystery deepened, pushing her to the edge of a truth that might destroy everything she thought she knew. The night had become suffocating, a darkness that pressed in from all sides. Emily sat in her apartment, every sound amplified by the silence that enveloped her. The tapping at the window still echoed in her mind, and the thought of the mysterious figure lurking in the alley made her pulse quicken. She had never felt so vulnerable, so completely exposed. Her world was spinning, each revelation only making the ground beneath her feel more unstable. The threats were escalating, the warnings more dire. But now, as the weight of it all bore down on her, a single, almost overlooked detail began to gnaw at the back of her mind, one that she couldn't shake, no matter how much she tried to focus on the bigger picture. It was something she had heard days ago, during a conversation she had with Eric. She had dismissed it then, too distracted by everything else going on. But now, as she sat there, unable to escape the quiet intensity of her thoughts, the words echoed in her head, sharper than before. Eric had mentioned something about the case not being what it seemed, about there being layers to Sarah's disappearance, layers that even the police couldn't see. He'd said it in passing, a throwaway line that she had brushed off at the time. But what if that was the key? Emily's phone buzzed, breaking the silence, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. It was a message from Laura. It was odd, because Emily hadn't heard from her in days. Laura had been distant, almost as if she was deliberately avoiding her, and now this text came completely out of nowhere. "I need to talk to you," it read. "Come to the old mill. It's urgent. Don't bring anyone with you. I'll explain everything. Trust me." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. After everything that had happened, after all the confusion, the threats, the mysterious figure following her, how could she trust anyone right now? But this was Laura. Her best friend. The one person who had always been there, the one person Emily had leaned on when things got too hard to carry alone. But as the minutes dragged on, the doubt crept in. Could she really trust Laura? Could anyone be trusted anymore? Without overthinking it, Emily grabbed her coat and headed out the door. The chill in the air felt like a harbinger of something much worse to come, but she couldn't back down. The words of the text echoed in her mind as she drove toward the mill. Trust me. Those words, once comforting, now felt hollow. Was Laura really trying to help her, or was she pulling Emily deeper into a trap? As she approached the old mill, the sense of unease grew stronger. The building loomed in the distance, its dilapidated form casting long shadows across the dirt path that led to it. Emily parked her car and stepped out into the cold night, the wind biting at her skin. Every step she took toward the entrance of the mill felt like a step into the unknown, and the air seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. The feeling of being watched crept up on her again. She hadn't noticed at first, but as she neared the entrance, Emily saw someone standing there in the shadows. She froze. It wasn't Laura. It wasn't anyone she recognized. The figure was tall, their face obscured by the darkness. A chill ran through her spine as she instinctively reached for her phone, but when she turned it on, the screen was cracked, the battery dead. She didn't know how long it had been that way, but in that moment, it didn't matter. Looking for someone, a voice broke the silence. Emily's heart nearly stopped. It was low, raspy, a voice she couldn't place, but one that felt entirely too familiar, as if it belonged to someone she should have known but didn't. Her instincts screamed for her to turn around, to run, but her legs felt frozen. Then, the figure stepped closer, just enough for the dim light to catch their features. Emily's breath caught in her throat as recognition slammed into her with the force of a wrecking ball. It was Eric. But there was something different about him, something off. The way he looked at her, the coldness in his eyes. It was as if he wasn't the same person she had trusted just days ago. His presence was suffocating, and his expression held a depth of danger she had never seen before. "You shouldn't have come here, Emily," Eric said, his tone dark and unsettling. "You were never meant to know this much." Her pulse quickened. "What are you talking about?" She could barely get the words out, fear clenching her throat. Why are you here? And where is Laura?" Eric didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a step closer, his face now fully illuminated by the faint light. Emily could see the hard set of his jaw, the darkness under his eyes. It was a look she had never seen in him before, calculated, almost predatory. "Laura," Eric began, his voice trailing off with a touch of contempt. "She's not who you think she is. None of them are. You should have never trusted her. And you definitely shouldn't have trusted me." Emily's mind raced. None of them were who she thought they were. What was he saying? She felt a cold sweat break out across her skin. She had to get out of here. This wasn't the friend she had known. This wasn't the man who had been helping her. This was someone else, someone who had been lying to her from the very beginning. "You think this is about Sarah?" Eric continued, his voice steady but laced with something colder, more dangerous. "This isn't about Sarah. This is about you, Emily. About us." "Us," she repeated, her heart hammering in her chest. The words didn't make sense. This couldn't be happening. Eric's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "You were never meant to find out. We were always one step ahead of you. But now you're too deep. You've crossed a line, and you're going to regret it." In that instant, everything Emily thought she knew shattered. The case, the threats, the warnings, it had all been a carefully orchestrated game, a trap designed to reel her in and force her to the truth. But the truth wasn't what she thought it was. Sarah's disappearance wasn't the center of this story, she was. Emily was the one they wanted. The real target had always been her. Before she could say anything else, Eric took a step forward, his expression turning cold, and for the first time, Emily realized that she wasn't just dealing with a person who had information, she was dealing with someone who had orchestrated this entire thing from the start. And that realization hit her with the force of a gut punch. As the wind howled through the empty mill, and the darkness pressed in from all sides, Emily understood nothing in this mystery had been what it seemed. Not her friends. Not the case. Not even herself. Every piece of the puzzle was shifting, and with every passing second, she was more certain that the game was far from over. But now, it wasn't about solving the case anymore. It was about survival. And she had no idea who she could trust. The night had grown unbearably silent, each second ticking by with a palpable weight, a pressure that seemed to build in Emily's chest with every passing moment. Eric's words echoed in her mind, his cold smile and calculated expression replaying in her thoughts like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. "You were never meant to find out," he had said. "We were always one step ahead of you." But as the shadows stretched long across the old mill, Emily felt something much darker pulling at the edges of her mind, the realization that she was no longer just investigating a disappearance. She was part of a much larger, much more dangerous story than she had ever imagined, and every choice she made now seemed to have impossible consequences. The drive back to her apartment was a blur, her hands gripping the wheel with white-knuckled intensity as her thoughts spiraled in 1,000 directions. How had it all gone so wrong? She had thought she was on the brink of uncovering the truth, but now everything felt like a lie, every person she had trusted, every lead she had followed, every step she had taken. What if Eric had never been her ally? What if Laura wasn't the friend she had always believed her to be? Her mind raced with the weight of it all, but as much as she wanted to believe there was some other explanation, some twist of fate that could clear everything up, the truth gnawed at her from every angle. She was alone. She had been alone in this from the start. And now, there were no easy answers. No safe choices. But deep down, she knew that avoiding Laura now would only make everything worse. She had to confront her. She had to know the truth, even if it meant facing the impossible. With a sharp breath, She grabbed her keys and left the apartment, the weight of the decision hanging heavy over her. The diner was quiet when Emily arrived, the dim light of the neon sign casting an eerie glow on the empty booths. She spotted Laura sitting in a corner, her hands folded tightly in front of her, her eyes looking out the window as if lost in thought. Emily's stomach churned. Laura had always been the steady one, the voice of reason when things got too chaotic. But tonight, there was something off about her, something that made Emily's heart race with unease. As she approached the booth, Laura looked up, her eyes meeting Emily's with an unreadable expression. "Sit down," Laura said, her voice unusually calm. But there was a tension in the air, a quiet desperation that Emily could feel in her bones. "I don't know what's going on anymore," Emily began, trying to steady her voice. "Eric, he said things I don't understand. About you. About me. About everything. What is going on, Laura?" Laura looked down at the table, her fingers trembling slightly. For a moment, she didn't say anything, and Emily felt a flicker of doubt, a fleeting moment of hope that maybe she had misunderstood. But then Laura's eyes met hers again, and Emily saw the truth in them. The guilt. The hesitation. "I never wanted you to get drag." When she arrived back at her apartment, the lights were on, the space eerily quiet. She stepped inside, but something felt off. The air felt different, heavier, as though it was thick with the weight of all the things left unsaid, all the secrets hidden just beneath the surface. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her thoughts. It was another message, this time from Laura. "Meet me at the diner. 10 minutes. We need to talk." The words sent a wave of anxiety crashing over her, but at the same time, something about them felt urgent, almost desperate. Laura, the one person she thought she could trust, wanted to meet her. But after everything that had happened, after Eric's shocking revelations, could she really trust her? Or was this just another part of the tangled web she was trapped in? Emily hesitated for a moment, her mind racing with questions. She could ignore the message, hide out, and try to figure this out on her own. "Get into this," Laura said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never wanted you to find out the way you did. But now that you know, there's no turning back." She paused, swallowing hard. "You're right to be scared, Emily. Everything Eric said is true. This has always been about you. It was never just about Sarah's disappearance. You've been part of something much bigger than you realize. Something dangerous. And I didn't want to involve you in it, but I didn't have a choice. I couldn't stop it." Emily felt like the ground had just shifted beneath her feet. "What are you talking about? What do you mean? And why didn't you tell me? Why keep me in the dark?" Laura leaned back in her seat, her eyes closing for a brief moment, as if she was searching for the right words. "Because I was protecting you. But I see now that it was a mistake. I should have told you the truth sooner. I should have told you everything about the people we've been dealing with. About the people who have been pulling the strings behind all of this. Emily, they're not just watching you. They've been using you. The art contest, the case, everything, it was all a setup. And you're in more danger than you realize." Emily's head was spinning, her thoughts tangled and her pulse racing. She couldn't process everything Laura had just said. The art contest, the cold case, Sarah's disappearance, none of it had been real. Had it all been part of some larger game? But why? Why her? Who are they? Who's behind this? Emily demanded, her voice shaking. "And why are you involved?" Laura's gaze hardened, her face a mask of regret. "I can't tell you everything. I'm sorry, Emily. But there's no time. You need to make a choice right now. You need to decide if you want to keep digging and risk everything, or if you want to walk away and live to see another day." Emily's mind raced. Walk away. She couldn't. She had already come too far, and the truth was slipping just out of her reach. She couldn't let it go now, not when she was so close. But the fear that had settled in her chest, was real. Laura's warning wasn't just a threat, it was a reality. If she kept pushing, if she kept digging, she might not make it out alive. But if she backed down, if she walked away, the truth would remain buried, and so would everything about Sarah's disappearance. She would never know what really happened. The injustice of it would eat away at her, a wound that would never heal. Her heart pounded in her chest, the weight of the decision nearly suffocating her. She was at a crossroads, and either path would lead to danger. No matter what she chose, she would be trapped. The tension in the diner was unbearable, each second stretching into eternity as Emily stared at Laura, searching for any hint of the truth behind the lie. There was no way out. No easy choice. Every move she made now would change everything. The stakes had never been higher, and the consequences were too dangerous to comprehend. "Make your decision, Emily," Laura whispered, her voice laced with urgency. "Before it's too late." And in that moment, Emily understood she was standing at the edge of something far darker than she had ever imagined, and no matter which path she chose, there would be no turning back. The weight of Laura's words hung in the air like a storm cloud, dark and suffocating. Emily sat across from her, feeling the walls close in. Every breath she took felt too shallow, as if the air itself was thick with secrets and lies. The diner's neon sign flickered outside, casting an eerie glow over the quiet room, but inside, the tension was palpable, the silence deafening. The more Emily thought about it, the more she realized this was no longer just about Sarah, about a missing persons case or a cold art contest. It wasn't just about her own investigation anymore. There was something much bigger, much darker, lurking in the shadows. Something that had always been there, something she had only just begun to uncover. Laura shifted in her seat, her eyes darting around the diner as if she was waiting for something, or someone. Emily's pulse quickened. "What do you mean, bigger?" she asked, the words almost tasting foreign in her mouth. "What are you not telling me? And why are you involved in this?" Laura's lips trembled slightly, and for the first time, Emily saw the fear in her friend's eyes. It wasn't just fear of being caught, it was fear of something much larger, something out of their control. "It's not just about us, Emily. It's not just about the people we know. There are more people involved, people in power, people who've been controlling this whole situation from the very beginning." She leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid of being overheard. "And you've been a pawn in their game all along." Emily's stomach turned, the realization hitting her like a punch to the gut. "What game?" she demanded, her voice cracking with urgency. "Who are these people?" Laura looked over her shoulder again, her eyes scanning the diner's empty booths, but Emily knew that there was more to this than Laura was willing to say. Her silence spoke volumes. This wasn't just a conspiracy, this was an operation. A plan. A plot so deeply rooted in the fabric of everything Emily had known that she couldn't see its edges anymore. It was like the floor was collapsing beneath her, and she was too far in to pull herself out. But it wasn't just the unknown that terrified Emily, it was the crushing feeling of betrayal that was beginning to sink in. She had trusted Laura. She had leaned on her for guidance, for support, and now, Laura was telling her that everything had been a lie. The art contest, the case, the mysterious threats, none of it had been a coincidence. The moment Emily had entered that competition, she had walked right into the web of a much larger scheme, and Laura had been tangled in it all along. It was the kind of betrayal that stung deep, that burned in places Emily didn't even know existed. And now, as the truth began to unfurl, she realized that the people who had been pulling the strings were closer than she ever imagined. "You have to understand," Laura continued, her voice growing more frantic. "They don't just target anyone. They target people who can't be ignored. People with connections. With influence. They've been watching you for a long time, Emily. They know your every move. And if you think it's just you and me now, you're wrong. There are more people, and they're all tied to the same thing." Emily's mind was spinning, each new detail unraveling the fragile grip she had on what was real and what wasn't. "Who?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Who's involved in this? Who's pulling the strings?" Laura hesitated, and for a moment, Emily thought she wasn't going to answer. But then, as if the weight of it had finally cracked her resolve, she spoke, the words coming out in a rush. "Eric, he's not just helping you. He's one of them. He's been working with them all along, setting you up. He's not the person you thought he was, Emily. He's been watching you, controlling you, guiding you straight into their hands. But it's not just him." Laura's voice broke, her eyes flickering with a kind of fear Emily had never seen in her before. "The police. Your own family. They're all involved." The world around Emily seemed to tilt, the ground beneath her feet swaying as the magnitude of what Laura had just said hit her. Eric, the one person who had seemed to care about her safety, who had acted like an ally throughout the investigation, was working against her. And now, Laura was saying that the police, her family, everyone she thought she could trust was part of this. A dizzying realization washed over her as she tried to piece it all together. How deep did this go? How many people had been lying to her for so long? Before she could even begin to process it, the door to the diner creaked open, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. She glanced toward the entrance, instinctively reaching for her bag, her fingers brushing against her phone. A chill ran down her spine as she saw the man step through the door, Eric. The man she had once trusted. The man who had helped her gather clues, who had been by her side when things started to spiral. And now, as he locked eyes with her from across the room, Emily felt the air go still. There was no warmth in his gaze. There was no trace of the man she thought she knew. "Emily," Eric said, his voice low and cold. "You should have stayed out of this. It's bigger than you think." The words sent a jolt through her, and for a moment, she felt paralyzed. The weight of everything that had happened, everything she'd uncovered, hit her with such force that she could barely breathe. What had she been doing? What had she gotten herself into? She had thought she was uncovering a mystery, solving a puzzle, but now, she saw the truth. This wasn't just a puzzle, it was a trap, a carefully constructed web designed to catch her at every turn. And she had been walking right into it. Eric stepped closer, his face expressionless, his movements deliberate. "It's too late now," he said, his voice almost mocking. "You've crossed a line you can't uncross. You're involved now, and there's no getting out. Not for you. Not for anyone." As the words sank in, a new wave of panic surged through Emily. She was cornered. There was no escape. Not from Eric. Not from Laura. Not from the conspiracy that had been lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. She didn't know who to trust anymore, didn't know where to turn. Laura had told her that there were choices to be made. That she could walk away or keep pushing for the truth. But in that moment, Emily understood the terrifying reality. There was no choice. No decision that could change the course of this nightmare. She had already crossed the point of no return. She had been a part of this for too long, and now, there was no walking away. And then, as the final, crushing realization hit her, just as Eric moved in closer, just as the walls seemed to close in around her, the lights flickered and went out. The diner plunged into complete darkness. The air was thick with the sound of her breath, the rapid pounding of her heart in her chest. Everything was silent for a moment, before a new sound pierced the quiet. The unmistakable click of a gun being cocked. And that was when Emily understood. She wasn't just in danger. She was trapped. And whoever was behind this, whoever had orchestrated this entire nightmare, was about to make their move. The darkness of the diner was suffocating, the air thick with fear and uncertainty. Emily's heartbeat was the only sound in the pitch-black room, every breath coming in shallow gasps. She could feel the presence of the people around her, their movements in the dark calculated, deliberate. The cold metal of the gun pressed against her ribs, a constant reminder of just how deep she was now in this nightmare, how far she'd fallen from the safety of her normal life. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faintest rustling of feet, and for a moment, Emily wondered if she was about to die. But she wasn't about to go down without a fight. Not after everything she'd been through. Not after uncovering so many lies. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," Eric's voice cut through the dark, its coldness wrapping itself around her like a vice. "You were always going to be a part of this, Emily. We gave you the chance to walk away, but you didn't listen. Now, there's no going back." Emily's mind raced, her thoughts scrambling as she tried to make sense of the chaos surrounding her. Everything had led to this moment, the disappearance, the mysterious art contest, the dangerous game that had pulled her deeper and deeper into a web of lies and deceit. And now, she understood the truth in all its horrific clarity. Eric wasn't just an ally. He was part of the conspiracy, part of a much bigger, much more dangerous operation that stretched far beyond her, and her family, her friends, the people she trusted, had been complicit from the start. Laura, despite her betrayal, had tried to warn her. But the trap had already been set, and Emily had walked right into it. She had always been a pawn, a tool in a game far beyond her comprehension. "What do you want from me?" Emily's voice was steady, even though every fiber of her being screamed for her to run, to fight, to do anything but sit here in the dark, helpless. But she had learned that running wouldn't save her. It never had. And neither would pleading. The truth was the only weapon she had left. Eric didn't answer right away, but she could hear the slight shift in his posture as he took a step closer. "It's not about what I want from you, Emily. It's about what you've already given." He paused, the silence hanging heavy in the air. "You're part of something much bigger than you ever imagined. And no matter what happens tonight, the pieces of this puzzle are already in motion. The plan is in place. It can't be stopped." Just as Emily was about to speak again, a loud crash sounded from the far side of the diner, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps, fast, heavy, and frantic. The diner door flew open, flooding the room with blinding light. For a split second, Emily couldn't make out who was there, but she could feel the shift in the atmosphere, the sudden change in the energy of the room. Everything that had felt so suffocating moments before now felt like it was about to burst. Then, just as quickly as it had arrived, the light was gone, and in its place stood Laura, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her face pale but determined. "I told you to stop," she shouted, her voice cracking under the strain. "This wasn't part of the plan, Eric. You were supposed to end it. But you couldn't. You couldn't stop yourself from pushing her into the fire, could you?" Eric's grip on the gun tightened, and Emily could feel the tension crackle between the two of them, like a violent storm about to break. "You shouldn't have come here, Laura," Eric spat, the venom in his voice unmistakable. "You've been playing both sides from the start, but you can't protect her now. No one can." Laura's eyes flashed with a fire Emily had never seen before, the intensity of her anger enough to cut through the darkness. "I'm not protecting her, Eric. I'm trying to stop you from making the biggest mistake of your life. But you're too far gone. You've already crossed the line." Before Emily could fully process what was happening, Laura lunged forward, her hand outstretched, and in one swift motion, she knocked the gun from Eric's hand. The room exploded into chaos as Eric's furious shout echoed off the walls, but it was too late. The gun slid across the floor, out of his reach. In that split second of confusion, Emily made her move, her instincts kicking in as she pushed herself off the booth and lunged for the gun. Her fingers grazed the cold metal, her heart racing as she gripped it, feeling the power of it in her hands. But just as she aimed the weapon at Eric, everything froze. There was a sharp, agonizing noise, and for a terrifying moment, Emily thought the world was coming apart. But then, she realized it was the sound of a door opening, another set of footsteps approaching. And then, a voice she never expected to hear. "Put it down, Emily." It was her father. The shock of seeing him there, in the midst of this chaotic, dangerous moment, nearly knocked the breath from her lungs. Her father, the man who had always been her protector, the man who had raised her with so much love and care, was standing in the doorway, his face stoic, unreadable. But there was something in his eyes that told her everything she needed to know. He wasn't here to save her. Eric grinned, his lips curling into a twisted smile. "You see, Emily, it was never just about you. It was never just a case. Your father was always part of this. He's been pulling the strings behind the scenes, setting everything in motion. You're in deeper than you realize." Her mind was a whirlwind of confusion, disbelief, and betrayal. Her father. Was he really involved in this? How could he be part of something so dark? But as she looked at him, the pieces began to fall into place. The subtle hints she had picked up over the past few weeks, the unexplained calls, the secretive meetings, the way he always seemed to be too busy when things got heated. It all made sense now. Her father had been one of them all along. And just like Eric, he had been controlling her every move. She wasn't part of some random conspiracy. She had been set up from the start. And now, the people she had trusted most were the ones who had orchestrated her downfall. "Dad," Emily whispered, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "How could you?" Her father didn't flinch. His gaze didn't soften. He simply nodded, his eyes empty of any warmth. "I never wanted it to go this far, Emily. I never wanted to hurt you. But you've seen too much. And now, you're in this for good. There's no going back. You have to understand, this isn't something you can just walk away from. The weight of it crashed down on Emily all at once. The truth she had spent so long searching for, the answers she thought would set her free, had just trapped her in an even darker reality. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore, she was fighting against a system that had been manipulating her, using her, her entire life. And now, in front of her, stood her father, the last person she ever thought would betray her. Her mind raced as the room seemed to spin, her grip tightening on the gun, but then, in a flash of clarity, she realized what she had to do. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about fighting back with violence. It was about breaking free. Breaking the cycle. Emily took a deep breath and dropped the gun to the floor, her heart still racing but her resolve stronger than ever. The moment of truth had arrived, and she wasn't going to let this be her end. Enough, she said, her voice steady, filled with a strength she hadn't known she had. This ends now. And just as her father and Eric exchanged a glance, just as they thought they had her cornered, that they could keep her under their control, Emily made a choice. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to hide. The truth had come at a price, but she wasn't going to let them take everything from her. Not anymore. Not today. Months had passed since that night, the night everything changed. Emily had done what she promised herself she would do, she walked away from the wreckage. She left behind the manipulation, the lies, and the people who had tried to control her life. The hardest part was the silence that followed, no phone calls, no messages, just the eerie quiet of a life she once knew, now shattered. It took time for her to piece everything back together, for her to understand that the story wasn't over. But slowly, she found herself standing on her own, learning what it meant to exist outside the chaos that had once consumed her. Her father had disappeared after that night. It was as if he had been swallowed by the earth itself, vanishing into thin air. The police said they had no leads, no evidence of where he had gone, but Emily knew the truth. He had disappeared to cover his tracks. And as for Eric, he was arrested a few weeks later, charged with a slew of crimes, many of which Emily hadn't even known about until the investigation had unraveled. His betrayal, his role in the conspiracy, was exposed for everyone to see, but it didn't bring Emily the relief she had expected. The victory didn't feel like one. Instead, it felt hollow, like a chapter in a story that had only opened new questions, questions that didn't seem to have answers. The world she had known had been a lie, and as much as she had tried to move forward, the scars from that lie stayed with her. They were a part of who she was now, part of her story. She wasn't the enemy, but neither was she the ally Emily had believed her to be. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. But in the quiet of the nights that followed, Emily would sometimes wonder if, somewhere in the shadows, Laura was still fighting for the same truth that Emily had fought for. It was a thought that lingered in the back of her mind, unanswered and unsettling, like an echo from the past that she couldn't escape. But life moved forward. Emily moved forward. She went back to school, to art, to the thing that had first set everything in motion. She spent her days surrounded by colors, shapes, and stories, finding solace in the beauty she could create with her hands. It wasn't the same as before, when she had been so sure of herself, so confident in what she wanted from the world. But it was enough. For the first time in a long time, she could breathe without feeling the weight of the past pressing down on her chest. She had learned to trust herself again, to embrace the uncertainty of the future. She had learned that she could survive, no matter what. But even as she settled into this new life, the shadows of what had happened never quite left her. There were still whispers, still unanswered questions that flickered through her mind in the quietest moments. The conspiracy wasn't over, not really. She had uncovered the surface, but she knew that there were deeper layers to it, things she hadn't even begun to understand. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that the people behind it all, people who had stayed hidden in the background, pulling the strings, hadn't just disappeared. They were still out there, watching, waiting. And maybe, just maybe, they were still watching her. As she sat in her studio one evening, staring at the blank canvas before her, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't done yet. That somehow, the story wasn't finished. It was an eerie sense of knowing, a gut feeling that told her there was more to come, that something bigger was waiting just around the corner. The art contest, the cold case, her family's involvement, it had all been pieces of a much larger puzzle. And now, as she painted, she felt the pieces falling into place, one by one, like a tide pulling her back into the storm. But in that moment, Emily made a choice. She wasn't going to let the fear of what she didn't know control her anymore. She wasn't going to be a pawn in anyone's game. The past had shaped her, yes, but it didn't define her. She was more than the mistakes and the lies, more than the people who had tried to break her. She was stronger than she had ever known, and she wasn't going to stop searching for the truth, even if that truth led her down roads she couldn't yet see. The brush in her hand moved with confidence, each stroke filling the canvas with color, with life. The painting took shape in front of her, a landscape of chaos and beauty, of light and dark. It was her story, and it was still being written. The canvas would never be empty again, because neither would she. As she stepped back to survey her work, Emily smiled softly to herself. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough. The final twist of the story was this: as she wiped the paint from her hands, Emily's phone buzzed, breaking the silence. A single message. No name attached. Just one line of text: "You're not finished yet." And with that, the story lingered in her mind, an unfinished masterpiece, still awaiting its final stroke. And then there was Laura. Emily had spoken to her once, after everything had calmed down, after the dust had settled. Laura, too, had disappeared. Not in the same way her father had, but she was gone, her own trail cold. Emily wasn't sure if she would ever see her again. She wasn't even sure if she wanted to. Laura had been both a friend and a foe, someone who had pulled her into the web and then tried to pull her out again. In the end, she had been a victim of the same system that had taken everything from Emily. And with that, she turned and ran toward the door, leaving behind everything she had ever known. The conspiracy was far from over, but Emily had taken the first step toward freedom. The battle wasn't won yet, but the war, it was just beginning.